Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Celine Holloway runs her fingers over the delicate silk dress she picked out for the evening. The soft glow in the mirror reflects her satisfied expression as she finishes her makeup with flawless red lipstick. Her eyes shine with anticipation, but not for the reason any normal wife would expect. She should be excited about her wedding anniversary dinner with Grant, yet all she feels is mild irritation for having to step away, even if only for a few hours, from the man who truly makes her heart race, Knox Mercer. For the past 16 months, Celine has been living a double life, lying as easily as she breathes. By day, she's the devoted wife, fulfilling her duties alongside Grant, who never suspected what was happening behind the scenes. By night, in moments arranged through well-crafted excuses and business trips that never really happen, she fully gives herself to her lover. Jackson, the child Grant believes is his, is the deepest link in this betrayal. The cruel truth? She never considered telling Grant he wasn't the father. While finishing getting ready, Celine receives a short and direct message from Grant, dinner at 8 p.m. I made the reservation. No declaration of love, no question about whether she wanted to celebrate differently. Just a cold, straightforward order. She rolls her eyes, free of guilt. To her, Grant has become predictable, dull, too absorbed in work to notice the obvious signs of adultery taking place right under his nose. But there's something Celine doesn't know. Grant has already found out everything. The man she believes to be a naive, busy executive isn't exactly who he seems. His job at a secret government agency not only taught him how to spot lies, but also how to dismantle them without the other side noticing. In the last few weeks, he hired private investigators, gathered evidence, and connected all the pieces of the puzzle of her infidelity. Now, he's just waiting for the perfect moment to deliver the checkmate. And tonight is the final move. When Celine enters the luxurious restaurant, her confidence remains unshaken. The glow of golden chandeliers reflects off the polished floor, and the aroma of sophisticated dishes floats in the air. She smiles when she spots Grant already seated at the table, impeccable in his black suit. However, as she walks closer, her smile starts to falter. Something is off. Her parents are there. Grant's best friends are there too. They all watch her with neutral expressions, but with an intensity that unnerves her. A wave of nervousness runs down her spine. Why would a romantic dinner include so many people? Even so, Celine keeps it together. She sits next to Grant and tries to pretend everything is normal. The waiter brings the wine, and Grant pours only for himself. Slowly, he swirls the glass between his fingers, studying the color of the liquid, without looking directly at Celine. Silence lingers, tense, until he finally looks up. And his gaze is different. There isn't a trace of the predictable husband she thought she could manipulate. Celine, he begins, his voice calm but carrying something cold and razor-sharp. Let's celebrate the truth. She stops breathing for a moment. Grant slides a white envelope across the table, and before she can ask, he opens it and starts taking out the documents inside. Photos of her and Knox together. Call records. Transcribed messages. And finally, a DNA test. The final blow. Congratulations, darling. You managed to keep this show going for quite a while, he says, not raising his voice, but with a destructive weight in each syllable. But it ends here. Celine's heart pounds. Her face goes pale. She opens her mouth, ready to deny, to beg, to lie once again. But Grant doesn't allow it. Please, do the honors, he says, sliding a piece of paper to her. Read it out loud. She blinks, confused, then realizes it's one of her own messages to Knox. An intimate, scandalous passage. Something she never imagined she'd have to say in front of her own parents, in front of her husband's friends. I don't need to read this. Grant leans forward, a slight smile appearing at the corner of his lips. But there's no amusement there. Only calculated coldness. If you don't read it, I will. But everyone here will hear it. Celine's fear grows. Her hands tremble as she holds the paper, and her voice comes out shaky when she starts reading. Each word feels like a whip tearing into her own skin. Silence. A dense silence, loaded with judgment and contempt. When she finishes, Grant tosses the final papers onto the table. Divorce papers. Sign them. Now. She widens her eyes, shocked. You're serious? Just like that, out of nowhere? Grant lets out a short, hollow laugh. This didn't happen overnight. You made it happen. It feels like the ground is crumbling beneath Celine's feet. She looks for some way out, but there isn't one. Her marriage is over. Her secret is exposed. Her own husband, whom she thought was a fool, orchestrated her downfall with surgical precision. And before she can say anything else, Grant drops the last bombshell. Oh, and just so you no longer have access to the bank accounts. Your belongings have been removed from the house. You have nowhere to go back to. Celine blinks rapidly, confused. What? Grant stands, straightens his jacket, and gives one last look to the woman he once loved. Good luck, Celine. You're going to need it. Then he walks away. The silence that follows Grant's departure is piercing. Celine still clutches the divorce papers in her trembling fingers, unable to process everything that just happened. Her breathing is unsteady, her heart pounding in her chest, and her face is pale as though the blood has drained from her skin. She looks up, seeking refuge in the one source of comfort she's always had, her parents. But what she finds is no compassion. Her mother's eyes, Evelyn Holloway, reflect pure disappointment. Her lips are pressed into a firm line, and when she finally speaks, her voice is laden with bitterness. My daughter, how could you? How did you have the nerve to destroy your own family like this? Her eyes glisten with unshed tears, but there's no tenderness there. Only disillusionment. Celine's father, Richard Holloway, crosses his arms and lets out a long sigh before shaking his head. And to think Grant was the best thing that ever happened to you. You had it all, Celine. A man who loved you, stability, respect. But you chose to throw it all away, for what? A whim? The weight of his words hits Celine like a punch to the gut. She opens her mouth to defend herself, but no words come. Her eyes move across the table, hoping for support. But when she sees Grant's friends, all she finds are looks of disgust and contempt. Some look away, others just sigh, disappointed. Nobody's on her side. One of Grant's friends, David, picks up his jacket and lets out a quick, bitter laugh. You know what? I always thought you weren't good enough for Grant. But not even in my worst thoughts did I imagine you'd be this low. With that, he pushes his chair back and stands up. One by one, Grant's friends do the same. Some mutter among themselves, others just give Celine a look of disdain before turning their backs. Her mother sighs, lowering her head, as if she no longer recognizes her own daughter. Her father doesn't even say goodbye. He simply places his napkin on the table and leaves without looking back. When the last person walks out the restaurant door, Celine realizes something terrifying. She's alone. Celine left the restaurant feeling like each step weighed a ton. Outside, the night was cold, and the street seemed deserted. Her chest burned with shame and anger, and her thoughts spun in circles. She had just lost everything in a matter of minutes. Not just financial stability or the house she lived in, but also her reputation and the respect of her own parents. Every harsh word echoed in her ears, adding to the burden of failure she now carried. A light rain began to fall, mixing with the hot tears rolling down her pale face. There were no taxis nearby, and she didn't even have enough money to order a ride. Even so, she refused to give up. She knew exactly where she needed to go. Knox, her lover, was now her only way out, her only safe haven in the storm. Without thinking twice, she started walking quickly through the streets lit by the yellow glow of the street lamps, hugging herself, trying to shield herself from the cold night wind. Before heading straight to Knox, she had to make a quick stop. There was something she couldn't leave behind, Jackson. She quickened her pace toward the apartment where her son stayed with Brittany, a young, friendly babysitter who often looked after him on nights Celine had social events or secret dates. When she arrived, she took a deep breath to hide her nerves and knocked softly but urgently on the door. It only took one knock for Brittany to open the door, surprised to see Celine so early and obviously distressed. "Is everything okay, Mrs. Holloway?" "You look so," Brittany asked, noticing Celine's upset expression. "It's nothing, Brittany, I'm just in a hurry." "I need Jackson now, please," Celine answered, trying to keep her voice from shaking. The young babysitter nodded anxiously, not asking questions, and handed Jackson, already asleep, into his mother's arms. The boy was breathing calmly, unaware of the turmoil that had taken over the night. With Jackson in her arms, Celine resumed her brisk walk to Knox's modest apartment. Along the way, tears finally slipped from her eyes, silently rolling down her face while her racing heart mixed fear and insecurity with a small glimmer of hope that Knox would still welcome her with open arms, as he always had before. When she got to the simple building where Knox lived, she hesitated for a moment. She had never imagined she might end up living in such a humble place. She climbed the narrow stairs with Jackson sleeping in her arms and knocked on the door, feeling an anxious tightness in her chest. It took Knox a while to open up, and when he finally did, his face showed surprise and unease at seeing Celine there, looking so worn out, holding the child. "What happened, Celine? What are you doing here so late with Jackson?" Knox asked, clearly uncomfortable with her sudden appearance. "Grant found out everything, Knox. He exposed our affair in front of everyone at dinner, showed the texts, the DNA test. Everything. He took everything from me. I'm out on the street. I don't have anywhere to go. I need to stay here, at least for tonight," Celine said, her eyes welling up with hot tears, her voice trembling. Knox stayed quiet, standing in the doorway as though he was trying to process every word that Celine was saying. Seeing him silent, Celine felt an even deeper sense of dread. Finally, Knox stepped aside, letting her in, but his expression made it clear he was uneasy about the whole situation. "You can stay tonight, but tomorrow we really need to talk about this," he said flatly. Celine swallowed the bitter response she wanted to give and entered the tiny apartment. The place felt stuffy, not very cozy, and the old couch seemed even more uncomfortable on that chilly night. She carefully laid Jackson on a small, worn couch and covered him with a faded blanket. Knox stood back against the wall, arms folded, clearly regretting he'd ever opened the door. Morning came way too quickly. Knox left early, saying nothing more than a curt, cold, "I need to go to work," leaving Celine alone with her thoughts and her growing despair. On his way to the job, Knox was still fuming inside, blaming Grant for the humiliation he'd suffered. But the worst was yet to come. He had barely arrived at the office when his boss summoned him with a serious gesture. Knox walked into the room already feeling a knot in his stomach, knowing this wouldn't end well. "Knox, sit down. I'm not sure what you did, but I got a phone call this morning that left me stunned. The president of the company himself called me, Knox. The president. The man didn't even know my name, and he asked me directly to fire you on the spot. Said you did something terrible to a friend of his, and that's something he won't tolerate. Called you cowardly and lacking character." The boss took a deep breath, shaking his head with deep disappointment. He also made sure to say it was Grant who filed the complaint. "Man, you must have really messed up." Knox tried to stammer something, but no defense came. His throat felt locked. This blow was too heavy to handle. He left the office in silence, defeated and humiliated, realizing he'd lost yet another battle, this time in his professional life. Back home, Knox walked in looking crushed, feeling smaller than he'd ever felt before. He opened the door slowly, seeing Celine sitting there, worn out and with dark circles under her eyes, still wearing the elegant clothes from the night before, now wrinkled and dirty. She lifted her head when she saw him come in and immediately noticed from the look on his face that something had happened. Knox let out a long, deep sigh, brimming with resentment and discouragement. "I just got fired. Grant destroyed my career. He took everything from us." Now both were in the same boat, completely ruined by the consequences of their own choices, unsure what to do next. Knox felt his heart burn in his chest as he drove through the dark city streets at high speed. Each rapid beat seemed to fuel the rage growing inside him. His hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. The silence in the car contrasted sharply with the storm raging in his mind. He had been humiliated, destroyed, reduced to nothing. All because of Grant Holloway, a man Knox had considered a total fool for not seeing that his wife was cheating under his own roof. But now, Knox was starting to realize he'd underestimated his rival, which only intensified his fury. The shame he felt burned like a fire inside his soul. He needed to face Grant in person and tell him how much he'd ruined his life. He had to look the man in the eye and unleash all this pent-up resentment. Knox couldn't just stand by and accept that kind of humiliation. As he approached Grant's upscale home, the contrast between that luxurious house and his miserable existence with Celine made him even angrier. He parked recklessly by the gate. Knox jumped out of the car, feeling the cold night air against his skin as he stomped toward the front door. His heart pounded wildly, fueled by adrenaline and hate. He raised his fist and pounded 3 times against the solid wooden door. The sound echoed powerfully, breaking the stillness of that quiet street. His hands were trembling with the rage boiling inside him. When the door finally opened, Grant was standing there. But he didn't look beaten or weakened. On the contrary, he looked calm, with a serene, almost indifferent expression. He was dressed casually, as if he'd been enjoying a normal night at home. Knox exploded right away, unable to hold back. "You ruined my life, you bastard. Who do you think you are, controlling everything and everyone around you? I lost my job because of you. I have nothing. Nothing." Grant stood there without moving, staring at Knox with total composure. There was no surprise in his gaze, no apparent anger, just a calm, unwavering look. Slowly, without reacting or answering the insults, Grant raised his right hand, revealing that he was holding a cell phone. Knox, overwhelmed by his own loss of control, didn't realize at first what that gesture meant. Until the deep, familiar voice broke the silence through the speakerphone, "Knox." Knox's heart stopped for a second. He knew that stern tone all too well. It was his father, a strict and upright man that Knox had admired more than anyone in the world. His father was the living embodiment of morality, honesty, and dignity, his hero, his biggest role model. Knox instantly went pale, feeling a knot tighten in his throat, stopping him from replying. "I didn't raise you to act like this. Cheating on a man in his own home, ruining a family, lying, and then showing up to demand answers? Knox Mercer, you acted like a weakling. A coward. It's time to stop behaving like a spoiled child who doesn't understand that actions have consequences. Own up to what you did and, above all else, honor our family name by taking care of your child. Grant is not your enemy, you're your own enemy." Knox felt his knees go weak, and an unbearable shame scorched every inch of his body. His father's words cut deep, destroying any attempt at reacting or defending himself. The man Knox revered his whole life was now publicly rejecting him. Grant stood there, expressionless in the doorway, eyes fixed on Knox, noting every flicker in his face, every tiny detail of this moment he had planned so meticulously. There was no anger on Grant's face. No satisfaction or gloating. Just cold resolve, like it was some bureaucratic matter that needed to be wrapped up efficiently. Knox tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. He just stood there, still and beaten, facing Grant while the phone remained on, as if his father was still listening, waiting for a response. After a tense silence that felt like an eternity, Grant finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "Your father's right, Knox. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them. Accept them with dignity and get out of here. I never want to see you at my door again." Slowly, Knox bowed his head, looking away. Each word from his father, and now from Grant, weighed on him like a ton of bricks, stripping away any remaining bit of dignity he might have had. He turned around without another word and descended those same steps he'd climbed in anger, feeling like every step cost him a monumental effort. Grant stayed in the doorway, watching him go until he disappeared from sight. The quiet night fell again over the elegant house, but inside Knox, a raging storm still brewed. He knew he'd never forget this humiliation, but for the first time in his life, he realized the consequences of his actions were entirely on him. He had no one else to blame. Knox got into his car, moving slowly, shoulders slumped, hands shaking as he turned the key in the ignition. The silence that filled the drive home was too heavy to break. He felt a deep ache in his chest, but it was no longer anger, it was the overwhelming shame and guilt that now consumed him, a pain he knew might never leave. Grant watched Knox's car vanish through the window, his own face reflecting only the absolute calm of someone who's always one step ahead. In truth, he had expected this fiery confrontation. His private investigators had handed him much more than compromising texts and DNA tests. They also discovered Knox's deep admiration for his father, Patrick Mercer, a man widely respected for his honorable nature and admired above all by his own son. Grant recognized that this admiration was a weakness he could use, and he planned carefully how to do it. The night before, knowing Knox would eventually show up, Grant made a direct call to Knox's father. In a firm yet polite conversation, he laid out the whole story, explaining that his son had crossed an unforgivable line and destroyed a family. Knox's father was stunned and deeply disappointed by his son's actions, promising Grant he'd help however he could. Before hanging up, Grant made a simple but pointed request: "Knox will come looking for me. When he arrives, can I count on you?" The father's response was immediate and decisive: "Yes, Grant. After all you've been through and what my son has done, my family owes you that." The weeks dragged on, filled with a heavy silence that grew stronger each day between Celine and Knox. In that cramped apartment, love seemed to be just a distant memory, replaced by the bitter cohabitation of two people who deeply regretted their own decisions. Knox fought every day to pay the bills, taking on temporary jobs he once would have thought beneath him. Celine, on the other hand, had started working at a modest clothing store downtown, enduring the cruel irony of serving customers who, in the past, would never have been part of her social circle. One day, while rearranging the store's shelves of cheap clothes she absolutely despised, Celine noticed a distinguished-looking customer walk in. The man introduced himself as Hunter Bennett, an elegant businessman with a friendly smile and what seemed like plenty of money he didn't mind spending. With sweet words and a charismatic grin, he started showing up often, obviously interested in Celine. For her, this felt like the perfect chance to get back, even indirectly, some of the comfort she'd lost. In no time, she was once again tangled up in a secret relationship, this time not for passion, but because she needed to regain some control over her life. Celine soon learned that Hunter was married, but that didn't stop her. After all, her life was already drowning in lies. Every hidden rendezvous fed her hope that this man was as powerful and influential as he claimed. But without her knowledge, each expensive gift, each fancy dinner, each empty promise of financial help was just a cover. He was actually a con artist who lived off appearances and fake splendor, drowning in debt and on the verge of losing everything, carefully hiding his truth. Meanwhile, Knox grew more distant from Celine, sensing her sudden changes but never imagining what was really going on. He felt she was keeping secrets, but he didn't have the strength or the desire to figure out what they were. And so, further and further apart, trapped in his own resentment, Knox was starting to realize he had no reason to stay faithful to the woman who had helped ruin his life. The inevitable cycle of betrayal was closing in on them again, this time even more poisonous and destructive. While Celine and Knox sank deeper into a routine of disloyalty and anger, Grant Holloway did exactly the opposite. Far away, far from that bitter shadow of the past, he decided to rebuild himself piece by piece. The man who had been betrayed, deceived, and humiliated was now enjoying a renewed life, full of purpose. Grant let himself breathe freely for the first time in a while, no longer weighed down by secrets. He had learned a tough lesson: sometimes, letting people suffer the consequences of their own choices is the best punishment possible. For months, Grant threw himself into his work. He took on challenging missions for the government's secret agency, traveling to various countries and facing risky situations that gradually restored the confidence shattered by Celine's betrayal. With every new mission, Grant rediscovered something in himself he thought was gone forever: his sense of worth, his inner strength, and his ability to start over from scratch as many times as needed. It was on one of these trips, at an elegant reception in Paris, that Grant had an unexpected encounter. Amid the soft lights and pleasant music filling the ballroom, he noticed the deep, intrigued gaze of a woman he had never seen before. She wasn't just beautiful, she was poised, self-assured, with a calm and warm manner that stood out from the superficial luxury around her. Her name was Claire Bennett, a successful journalist who focused on international politics. When Grant approached her, both captivated and curious, he realized that Claire didn't look at him with the calculated chill Celine used to show. Instead, she looked at him with genuine warmth he hadn't seen in a woman's eyes for a long time. Their conversation started off polite, but within minutes, it became genuine and meaningful. Claire listened closely to everything he said, her eyes showing real interest and understanding. Unlike Celine, there were no mind games, no ulterior motives, just two people connected in an honest conversation. That's when Grant realized he'd forgotten how good it felt to talk to someone openly, without fearing betrayal or lies. As the night went on, they shared stories, experiences, dreams, and even old scars. Claire had her own emotional wounds, but unlike Celine, she had learned from her losses. She was a strong, independent woman whose heart still believed in truth and integrity, values Grant deeply respected. When the evening ended, Grant walked Claire to the door of the hotel where she was staying. Neither of them wanted the night to end so quickly, but they respected each other's space. Under the starry sky, Claire turned slowly, smiled gently, and lightly touched his arm. "Grant, thank you for tonight. It's rare to meet someone like you. I really hope we can meet again sometime." Grant felt a comforting warmth spread through his chest. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time, true peace, something he didn't even remember was possible. He smiled back at Claire, waved goodbye, and slowly walked away, aware he had found someone special. Someone who, for the first time in many years, made his heart beat with hope again. Strolling through the quiet streets of that charming city, Grant understood the real meaning of that unexpected night. Claire wasn't just another special woman, she was a powerful symbol of a fresh start, living proof that no matter how dark the past may seem, there's always room for happiness and peace. As the city lights sparkled around him, Grant moved forward, leaving behind the shadows of a betrayal that no longer mattered. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.